Hi friend, I want to talk to you about why you should not take up space and what you should be doing instead, or what you could be doing instead. I came to the United States in 2008. I was 17 at the time. Nope, that's not right. 18 at the time. And I got the green card through a lottery, through the DV1 lottery program, and I got to the Dallas International Airport. First time in the United States, 2 suitcases and a backpack. It's typical like South Asian, story. You hear that from like uncles and aunties, like, "Oh, I came to the country with like $5," but it was actually true. Like my dad gave me like, "Okay, just take a couple of $100 and then go," and that was 2008. So right now, as I'm recording this, it is February 23, 2025. It's been more than a decade of me being in the States. So what do I mean by taking up space, right? So by the way, we're gonna actually make some chai together. So feel free to just hang out with me. We're gonna make some masala chai as we're doing this. So taking up space is, could mean to, occupy or reoccupy positions of privilege, positions of power that has been historically or culturally reserved for a certain classes of people based on their entrusted or perceived privilege. The first time I even realized that there was such a thing as taking up space was when I was at my school, the seminary that I was studying theology at, and I was the only person who looked like me in the class. At the time, I didn't realize this idea of taking up space, but I came across some videos, some articles, particularly from people of color, who would say things like, "Hey, if you are a racial or a cultural minority, you need to take up space." What most of them also meant or could mean was to assert your like individuality and your personality, because you've rediscovered your worth and your value in a particular context. You also have a place in the room, so don't shrink yourself. Don't just go like this. You speak your truth, say the things that you have to say, be loud, be bold, take courage, take up space. So I started to watch these videos and I was like, yeah, you're right. I need to take up space. And so that's what I did. I started to speak up more and be a lot more confident, because I was like, oh, if they have the chance at the seat, if they can do this, then I can do this too. And so I signed up for different organizations. I ran for president, or religious vice president at my university. That's just a glorified title for like being a student pastor for the school. But anyhow, it was a fun time. I got it. I was like, man, this feels good. When you begin to take up space, it can feel intoxicating, especially if you're a person of color, especially if you're a racial or cultural or ethnic minority, a religious minority. It feels like, oh man, this is good. You begin to taste power and validation that you didn't know you had. So that's exactly how I felt. And so I kept taking up space. So why did I even begin the video by saying don't do it? What I've realized, at least in my own life, is like the more I take up space, or more I have this kind of orientation towards, okay, I need to be seen, I need to be heard, and therefore I'm going to index my actions and my emotions towards that particular purpose. I've realized that when I've left myself go unchecked or unexamined, when I fail to revisit my moral foundations, for me, that comes from Christianity. That's my symbol system. I've realized that this exploration of space could end up being another form of conquest fueled by a scarcity mindset. What do I mean by that? It's like, in an effort to take up space, you could run the risk of, exploiting, or even, and I want to use the word, like maybe colonizing space, doing the same thing that others have historically done, to prevent you from getting the spaces that you rightly deserve. In an effort to take up space, you could run the risk of exploiting or conquering space, doing the same thing that others have historically done, to prevent you from getting the spaces that you rightly deserve. And this happens in a couple of different ways, especially in groups, in cultural groups. For example, I'll give you an instance. At a church, there was a cultural group and they were trying to raise some money. So what did they do? They got together and they put out this amazing cultural program. But as I was seeing the program, I realized that the programming elements that they used were not endemic to that particular cultural group. In other words, they were taking stuff from other cultures that are tangential to their particular culture, that are more familiar to a majority audience, and just so that they can use those cultural particularities to actually get money. So they're using culture and otherness as kind of this tool for exploitation. They're using culture as a way to be like, okay, I want to get money. I'm taking up space in order to get something. So that's one extreme where I think things can get a little dicey, especially for people of color, when it comes to taking up space. The other extreme is when you use culture and otherness as a tool for marginalization. An example for that is saying like, okay, they're saying unless you are this particular cultural group or subcultural group, you cannot do this or that, or so on and so forth and so on. I mean, I've seen this you see this in the form of casteism in places like India or in Sri Lanka, where unless you are a member of a particular subculture, you can't do the thing. So now you're using, again, so it's a way of using your cultural particularities as a way to now exploit and marginalize and also prevent other people from getting to where you got to. Oh, can you hear that? That's my kettle. Hold on, I'll be back. Don't go anywhere. All right, we are back. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, said that whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process they do not become monsters themselves. He was like, yeah, if you're fighting monsters, good. But just make sure that you also don't end up being monsters yourself. I see that happening sometimes, where in groups where there's diversity, where individuals, in an effort to take up space, they unintentionally or intentionally sometimes marginalize other people groups. So how do we take up space without marginalizing other people? How do we take up space while also creating space for others? I like this quote by, again, philosopher Hannah Arendt, who says that the smallest act in the most limited of circumstances bears the seed of the same boundlessness, because one deed and sometimes one word suffices to change every constellation. Love that. I love that quote because it offers a different perspective, a refreshingly alternative perspective on change making and impact making. A lot of the times when we see on social media and on the internet, impact and influence, in order for it to be what it is, it's seen as, it needs to be something vocal or big or huge, whatever. And I just love this thought by Dr. Arendt, who says that it's sometimes the smallest act in the most limited of circumstances, and if it's done intentionally and meaningfully, it just changes every constellation. It changes the whole ecosystem, the ecology of a certain space. Maybe instead of taking up space, what if we started to steward our space, where we begin to step into space as a way to tend, care, and nurture the space, rather than as a way to prove, validate, or justify through the space. Where instead of seeing the space as this gift, you're seeing the space as a tool that you can do whatever you want to exploit it, manipulate other people. Because why? Because you just have to take up space. And I believe that the stewardship of your space becomes a blessing to those around you, because what happens is the more you're intentional about the space that you already have, the more other people who are connected to you cannot they can't ignore you anymore. Like you become a blessing to them, where your excellence is a form of revolution, where you being present in that space is a contradiction, a protest against all of their preconceptions and their assumptions about who you are and what work should be and what love should be like. To the point where now they're compelled to visit their own plots and their own spaces. When I was in Sri Lanka visiting family, and I talked to an older pastor, and I'm in pastoral ministry right now, so I just, you need mentors. He basically said one line which had stayed with me and continues to stay with me till today. He says, wherever you are, Kevin, bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you are planted. Just love that metaphor, illustration, especially considering the fact that for me, like, I've moved so much. Like, I've gone from one place to the next. I've born in Sri Lanka, lived in the Middle East, came to the States when I was 18, and then went to Lebanon, then spent some time in Jordan, came back and went to Sudan, I've just moved so much that stability and a sense of home, that's a luxury sometimes. And that's a whole different video for another day. I've taken this concept of blooming where I'm planted so seriously that whenever I go to a place, instead of saying like, okay, Kevin, like, okay, yeah, you need to now prove yourself to this group of people. Like, you need to prove yourself to this person or that person. I'm like, God, like, thank you so much for the space. Thank you for this opportunity. The invitation itself is qualification. So I don't now work towards validation. I work from validation. Like, I don't work towards approval. I work from a place of approval. And whenever I've done that, whenever I've made that shift, it's been liberating. Where I'm like now free to like do the things that I have to do, whether it's to meet someone for coffee or some chai or do a sermon or do a service project or do some content or whatever it is. It's like there's less energy invested in trying to validate myself and more energy invested in stewarding what I have in front of me and what the gift that God has given me. I think this is already kind of done. I'm not going to steep it too much. How do we actionalize this? Let's put some hands and feet to this idea. If you are somebody and you're hearing this phrase, taking up space, for the first time, and you're like, man, that makes sense. Like, I've shrunk myself so much to fit into, my group, whether it's my college classroom or my home group or my workplace, my church, or whatever it is. If this is the first time hearing that nomenclature, I encourage you to take up space in the traditional sense. What do I mean by that? I mean, take small steps towards asserting your individuality. Like, say the thing that you didn't want to say because of fear. Do the thing. Just slowly make small moves that are consistent with who you are as a person. Okay, so slowly do that and see what happens, because it feels really good when you take a chance on yourself and you actually vote for yourself in that space. So just keep doing that. If you are new to this whole concept of taking up space. Okay. Now, for those of you who have already tasted the power of taking up space, and what's up? Why are you crying? Okay, that's my cat. Sorry. If you already have done that and you have, you're used to feeling powerful to the point where now you are an evangelist almost. You tell other people. You also encourage other people to take up space and all that. Boldly step into your gardens. Do the things that have gotten you to where you are. But then to care for these places, steward them. Look into your space, into your spheres of influence, and look for places where you can grow new seeds, new opportunities, grow new gardens, new plots, so that not only you will grow, but other people can grow as well. So instead of taking up space, just say, oh, you know what? I have this space already. Good. There are some things that I don't have yet. That's okay. But I'm going to continue to steward and cultivate and grow the spaces that I have. Now, if you are in positions of power and privilege in your particular context. You are in a role where you can actually make personal decisions, and you are in those roles because historically and culturally these roles were made and designed for people who look like you, who act like you, think like you, vote like you. You're in a position of privilege, and you have other people working under you or with you, and you're responsible for them. I'm speaking to you right now. I encourage you, my friend, to see your space as a gift and not a right. I want you to see your space, your leadership, your expertise, your domain as something that's been entrusted to you by forces and people outside of your control. I would encourage you to find creative ways to release garden space so that other people can also start to garden and steward that space as well. How amazing would that be? So my friend, I pray that you bloom where you're planted, because I believe that stewardship is resistance. And resistance doesn't always have to be retributive. Resistance can also be restorative. This is some masala chai. So good. Let me know in the comments as to what you resonated with or you didn't. Let's carry this conversation moving forward. Take care and God bless.